This audio presentation of Emerson's essay on art is brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2011, all rights reserved. Verse: Give to barrows, trays and pans, grace and glimmer of romance. Bring the moonlight into noon, hid in gleaming piles of stone. On the city's paved street, plant gardens lined with lilac sweet. Let spouting fountains cool the air, singing in the sun-baked square. Let statue, picture, park, and hall, ballad, flag, and festival, the past restore, the day adorn, and make each morrow a new morn. So shall the drudge in dusty frock spy behind the city clock retinues of airy kings, skirts of angels, starry wings, his father shining in bright fables, his children fed at heavenly tables. 'Tis the privilege of art thus to play its cheerful part, man and earth to acclimate, and bend the exile to his fate, and molded of one element with the days and firmament. Teach him on these as stairs to climb, and live on even terms with time, whilst upper life the slender rill of human sense doth overfill. End of verse. Essay 12, Art. Because the soul is progressive, it never quite repeats itself, but in every act attempts the production of a new and fairer whole. This appears in works both of the useful and the fine arts, if we employ the popular distinction of works according to their aim, either at use or beauty. Thus in our fine arts, not imitation, but creation is the aim. In landscapes, the painter should give the suggestion of a fairer creation than we know. The details, the prose of nature he should omit, and give us only the spirit and splendor. He should know that the landscape has beauty for his eye, because it expresses a thought which is to him good, and this because the same power which sees through his eyes is seen in that spectacle, and he will come to value the expression of nature and not nature itself, and so exalt in his copy the features that please him. He will give the gloom of gloom and the sunshine of sunshine. In a portrait, he must inscribe the character and not the features, and must esteem the man who sits to him as himself only an imperfect picture or likeness of the aspiring original within. What is that abridgment and selection we observe in all spiritual activity, but itself the creative impulse? For it is the inlet of that higher illumination which teaches to convey a larger sense by simpler symbols. What is a man but nature's finer success in self-explication? What is a man but a finer and compacter landscape than horizon figures, nature's eclecticism? And what is his speech, his love of painting, love of nature, but a still finer success? All the weary miles and tons of space and bulk left out, and the spirit or moral of its contract into a musical word, or the most cunning stroke of a pencil. But the artist must employ the symbols in use in his day and nation to convey his enlarged sense to his fellow man. Thus the new art is always formed out of the old. The genius of the hour sets his ineffable seal on the work, and gives it an inexpressible charm for the imagination. As far as the spiritual character of the period overpower the artist and finds expression in his work, so far it will retain a certain grandeur, and will represent to future beholders the unknown, the inevitable, the divine. No man can quite exclude this element of necessity from his labor. No man can quite emancipate himself from his age and country, or produce a model in which the education, the religion, the politics, usages, and arts of his time shall have no share. Though he were never so original, never so willful and fantastic, he cannot wipe out his work every trace of the thought amidst which it grew. The very avoidance betrays the usage he avoids. Above his will and out of his sight, he is necessitated by the air he breathes and the idea on which he and his contemporaries live and toil, to share the manner of his times, without knowing what that manner is. Now that which is inevitable in the work has a higher charm than individual talent can give, inasmuch as the artist's pen or chisel seems to have held and guided by a gigantic hand to inscribe a line in the history of the human race. This circumstance gives a value to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, to the Indian, Chinese, and Mexican idols. However gross and shapeless, they denote the height of the human soul in that hour, and were not fantastic but sprung from a necessity as deep as the world. Shall I now add that the whole extant product of the plastic arts has herein its highest value as history, as a stroke drawn in the portrait of that fate, perfect and beautiful, according to whose ordinations all beings advance to their beatitude. Thus, historically viewed, it has been the office of art to educate the perception of beauty. We are immersed in beauty, but our eye have no clear vision. It needs by the exhibition of single traits to assist and lead the dormant taste. We carve and paint, or we behold what is carved and painted, as the students of the mystery of form. The virtue of art lies in detachment, in sequestering one object from the embarrassing variety. Until one thing comes out from the connection of things, there can be enjoyment, contemplation, but no thought. Our happiness and unhappiness are unproductive. The infant lies in a pleasing trance, but his individual character and his practical power depend on his daily progress in the separation of things, and dealing with one at a time. Love and all the passions concentrate all existence around a single form. It is the habit of certain minds to give an all-excluding fullness to the object, the thought, the word they alight upon, and to make that for the time the deputy of the world. These are the artists, the orators, the leaders of society. The power to detach and to magnify by detaching is the essence of rhetoric in the hands of the orator and the poet. This rhetoric, or power to fix the momentary eminency of an object, so remarkable in Burke, in Byron, and Carlyle, the painter and sculptor exhibit in color and stone. The power depends on the depth of the artist's insight of that object he contemplates, for every object has its root in central nature, and may of course be so exhibited to us to represent the world. Therefore each work of genius is the tyrant of the hour, and concentrates attention on itself. For the time, it is the only thing worth naming to that, be it a sonnet, an opera, a landscape, a statue, an oration, the plan of a temple, or a campaign, or of a voyage of discovery. Presently we pass to some other object, which rounds itself into a whole, as did the first. For example, a well-laid garden, and nothing seems worth doing but the laying out of gardens. I should think fire the best thing in the world if it were not acquainted with air and water and earth. For it is the right and property of all natural objects, of all genuine talents, of all native properties whatsoever, to be for their moment the top of the world. A squirrel leaping from bough to bough, and making the wood but one wide tree for his pleasure, fills the eye not less than a lion, is beautiful, self-sufficing, and stands then and there for nature. A good ballad draws my ear and heart while I listen, as much as an epic has done before. A dog drawn by a master, or a litter of pigs, satisfies, and is a reality not less than a fresco of Angelo. From this succession of excellent objects, we learn at last the immensity of the world, the opulence of human nature, which can run out to infinitude in any direction. But I also learn that what astonished and fascinated me in the first work astonished me in the second work also. that excellent of all things in one. The office of painting and sculpture seems to be merely initial. The best pictures can easily tell us their last secret. The best pictures are rude draughts of a few and miraculous dots and lines and dyes which make up the ever-changing landscape which figures amidst which we dwell. Painting seems to be the eye with dancing as to the limbs. When that has educated the frame to self-possession, to nimbleness, to grace, the steps of the dancing master are better forgotten. So painting teaches me the splendor of color and the expression of form, and as I see many pictures and higher genius in the art, I see the boundless opulence of the pencil, the indifferency in which the artist stands free to choose out the possible forms. If he can draw everything, why draw anything? And then is my eye open to the eternal picture which not paints in the street with moving men and children, beggars and fine ladies, draped in red and green and blue and gray, long-haired, grizzled, white-faced, black-faced, wrinkled, giant, dwarf, expanded, elfish, caped and based by heaven, earth, and sea. A gallery of sculpture teaches more austerity the same lesson. As picture teaches the coloring, so sculpture the anatomy of form. When I have seen fine statues and afterwards enter a public assembly, I understand well what he meant who said, "When I have been reading Homer, all men look like giants." I, too, see that painting and sculptures are gymnasts of the eye. It's training to the niceties and curiosities of its function. There is no statue like this living man, with his infinite advantage over all ideal sculpture of perpetual variety. What a gallery of art have I here! No mannerist made these varied groups and diverse original single figures. Here is the artist himself improvising, grim and glad at his block. Now one thought strikes him, now another, and with each moment he alters the whole air, attitude, and expression of his clay. Away with your nonsense of oil and easels, of marble and chisels, except to open your eyes to the masteries of eternal art. They are hypocritical rubbish. The reference of all production at last to an aboriginal power explains the traits common to all works of the highest art, that they are universally intelligible, that they restore to us the simplest states of mind, and are religious. Since what skill is therein shown is the reappearance of the original soul, a jet of pure light, it should produce a similar impression to that made by natural objects. In happy hours, nature appears to us one with art, art perfected, the work of genius, and the individual in whom simple taste and susceptibility to all the great human influences overpower the accidents of a local and special culture, is the best critic of art. Though we travel the world over to find the beautiful, we must carry it with us or we find it not. The best of beauty is a finer charm than skill in surfaces, in outlines, or rules of art can ever teach, namely a radiation from the work of art of human character. A wonderful expression, though stone or canvas or musical sound, of the deepest and simplest attributes of our nature, and therefore most intelligible at last to those souls which have these attributes. In the sculptures of the Greeks, in the masonry of the Romans, and in the pictures of the Tuscan and Venetian masters, the highest charm is the universal language they speak. A confession of moral nature, of purity, love, and hope, breathes from them all. That which we carry to them, the same we bring back more fairly illustrated in memory. The traveler who visits the Vatican and passes from chamber to chamber through gallery of statues, vases, sarcophagus, and candelabra, through all forms of beauty, cut in the richest materials, is in danger of forgetting the simplicity of the principles out of which they all sprung, and that they had their origin from thought and laws in his own breast. He studies the technical rules of these wonderful remains, but forgets that these works were not always thus constellated, that they are the contributions of many ages and many countries, that each came out of the solitary workshop of one artist, who toiled perhaps in ignorance of the existence of other sculpture, created his work without other model save life, household life, and the sweet and smart of personal relations, of beating hearts and meeting eyes, of poverty and necessity and hope and fear. These were his inspirations, and these are the effects he carries home to your heart and mind. In proportion to his force, the artist will find in his work an outline for his proper character. He must not in any manner pinched or hindered by his material, but through his necessity of imparting himself, the adamant will be wax in his hand, and will allow an adequate communication of himself, in his full stature and proportion. He need not cumber himself with a conventional nature and culture, nor ask what is the mode in Rome or in Paris, but that house, and weather, and manner of living which poverty and the fate of birth have made at once so odious and so dear, in the gray, unpainted wood cabin, on the corner of a New Hampshire farm, or in the log hut of the backwoods, or in the narrow lodging where he has endured the constraints and seeming of the city poverty, will serve as well as any other condition as the symbol of a thought which pours itself indifferently through all. I remember when in my younger days I had heard of the wonders of Italian painting. I fancied the great pictures, which would be great strangers, some surprising combinations of color and form, a foreign wonder, barbaric pearl and gold, like the spontoons and standards of the militia, which play such pranks in the eyes and imaginations of schoolboys. I was to see and acquire I knew not what. When I came at last to Rome and saw with eyes the pictures, I found that genius left to novices the gay and fantastic and ostentatious, and itself pierced directly to the simple and true, that it was familiar and sincere, that it was the old eternal fact I had met already in so many forms, unto which I lived, that it was the plain you and me I knew so well, had left at home in so many conversations. I had the same experiences already in a church at Naples. There I saw that nothing was changed with me but the place, and said to myself, Thou foolish child, hast thou come out hither, over 4,000 miles of salt water, to find that which was perfect to thee there at home? That fact I saw again in the Academia at Naples, in the chambers of sculpture, and yet again when I came to Rome, and to the paintings of Raphael, Angelo, Sacchi, Titian, and Leonardo da Vinci. What old mole workest thou in the earth so fast? It had traveled by my side. That which I fancied I had left in Boston was here in the Vatican, and again at Milan, and at Paris, and made all traveling ridiculous as a treadmill. I now require this of all pictures, that they domesticate me, not that they dazzle me. Pictures must not be too picturesque. Nothing astonishes men so much as common sense and plain dealing. All great actions have been simple, and all great pictures are. The Transfiguration by Raphael is an eminent example of this peculiar merit. A calm, benign beauty shines over all his picture, and goes directly to the heart. It seems almost to call you by name. The sweet and sublime face of Jesus is beyond praise. Yet how it disappoints all florid expectations. This familiar, simple, home-speaking countenance is as if one should have met a friend. The knowledge of picture dealers has its value, but listen not to their criticism when your heart is touched by genius. It was not painted for them, it was painted for you, for such has had eyes capable of being touched by simplicity and lofty emotions. Yet when we have said all our fine things about the arts, we must end with a frank confession. that the arts, as we know them, are but initial. Our best praise is given to what they aimed and promised, not to the actual results. He has conceived meanly of the resources of man, who believes that the best age of production is past. The real value of the Iliad, or the Transfiguration, is as signs of power, billows or ripples that are the steam of tendency, tokens of the everlasting effort to produce, which even in its worst estate the soul betrays. Art has not yet come to its maturity. If it do not put itself abreast with the most potent influences of the world, if it is not practical and moral, if it do not stand in connection with the conscience, if it does not make the poor and uncultivated feel that it addresses them with a voice of lofty cheer. There is higher work for art than the arts. They are abortive births of an imperfect or vitiated instinct. Art is the need to create, but in its essence, immense and universal, it is impatient of working with lame or tied hands, and of making cripples and monsters, such as all pictures and statues are. Nothing less than the creation of man and nature is its end. A man should find in it an outlet for his whole energy. He may paint and carve only as long as he can do that. Art should exhilarate and throw down the walls of circumstance on every side, awakening in the beholder the same sense of universal relation and power which the work evinced in the artist, and the highest effect is to make new artists. Already history is old enough to witness the old age and disappearance of particular arts. The art of sculpture has long ago perished to any real effect. It was originally a useful art, a mode of writing, a savage's record of gratitude or devotion, and among a people possessed of a wonderful perception of form, this childish carving was refined to the utmost splendor of effect. But it is the game of a rude and youthful people, and not the manly labor of a wise and spiritual nation. Under an oak tree loaded with leaves and nuts, under a sky full of eternal eyes, I stand in a thoroughfare. But in the works of our plastic arts, and especially of sculpture, creation is driven into a corner. I cannot hide from myself that there is a certain appearance of paltriness, as of toys, and the trumpery of a theater in sculpture. Nature transcends all our modes of thoughts, and its secret we do not yet find. But the gallery stands at the mercy of our moods, and there is a moment when it becomes frivolous. I do not wonder that Newton, with an attention habitually engaged on the path of planets and suns, should have wondered what the Earl of Pembroke found to admire in stone dolls. Sculpture may serve to teach the pupil how deep is the secret of form, but purely the spirit can translate its meaning into that eloquent dialect. But the statue will look cold and false before the new activity which needs to roll through all things, and is impatient of counterfeits and things not alive. Picture and sculpture are the celebration and festivities of form, but true art is never fixed, but always flowing. The sweetest music is not in the oratio, but in the human voice when it speaks from its instant life tones of tenderness, truth, or courage. The oratio has already lost its relation to the morning, to the sun, and the earth, but that persuading voice is in tune with these. All works of art should not be detached, but extemporaneous performances. A great man is a new statue in every attitude and action. A beautiful woman is a picture which drives all beholders nobly mad. Life may be lyric or epic, as well as a poem or a romance. A true announcement of the law of creation, if a man were found worthy to declare it, would carry art up into the kingdom of nature and destroy its separate and contrasted existence. The fountains of invention and beauty in modern society are all but dried up. A popular novel, a theater, or a ballroom makes us feel that we are all paupers in the almshouse of this world, without dignity, without skill, or without industry. Art is as poor and low, the old tragic necessity, which lowers on the brows even at the Venuses and the Cupids of the antique, and furnishes the sole apology for the intrusion of such anomalous figures into nature, namely that they were inevitable, that the artist was drunk with a passion for form which he could not resist, and which vented itself in these fine extravagances, no longer dignifies the chisel of the pencil. But the artist and the connoisseur now seek in art the exhibition of their talent, or an asylum from their evils of life. Men are not well pleased with the figure they make in their own imagination, and they flee to art, and convey their better sense in an oratio, a statue, or a picture. Art makes the same effort with a sensual propensity makes, namely, to detach the beautiful from the useful, to do up the work as unavoidable, and hating it, pass on to enjoyment. These solaces and compensations, this division of beauty from use, the laws of nature do not permit. As soon as beauty is sought, not from religion and love, but for pleasure, it degrades the seeker. High beauty is no longer attainable by him in canvas or in stone, in sound or in lyrical construction. An effeminate, prudent, sickly beauty, which is not beauty, is all that can be formed, for the hand can never execute anything higher than the character can inspire. The art that thus separates it itself first separated. Art must not be a superior talent, but must begin farther back in man. Now men do not see nature to be beautiful, and they go to make a statue which shall be. They abhor men as tasteless, dull, and inconvertible, and console themselves with the color bags and blocks of marble. They reject life as prosaic, and create a death which they call poetic. They dispatch the day's weary chores and fly to voluptuous reveries. They eat and drink, that they may afterwards execute the ideal. Thus is art vilified. The name conveys to the mind its secondary and bad senses. It stands in the imagination as somewhat contrary to nature, and struck with death from the first. Would it not be better to begin higher up, to serve the ideal before they eat and drink, to serve the ideal in eating and drinking, in drawing the breath, and in the functions of life? Beauty must come back to the useful arts, and the distinction between the fine and the useful arts be forgotten. If history were truly told, if life were nobly spent, it would be no longer easy or possible to distinguish the one from the other. In nature all is useful, all is beautiful. It is therefore beautiful because it is alive, moving, reproductive. It is therefore useful because it is symmetrical and fair. Beauty will not come at the call of a legislature, nor will it repeat in England or America its history in Greece. It will come, as always, unannounced, and spring up between the feet of brave and earnest men. It is in vain that we look for genius to reiterate its miracles in the old art. It is its instinct to find beauty and holiness in new and necessary facts, in the field and roadside, in the shop and mill. Proceeding from a religious heart, it will raise to a divine use the railroad, the insurance office, the joint stock company, our law, our primary assemblies, our commerce, the galvanic battery, the electric jar, the prism, and the chemist's retort, in which we seek now only an economical use. Is not the selfish and even cruel aspect which belongs to our great mechanical works, to mills, railroads, and machinery, the effect of the mercenary impulses of which these works obey? When its errands are noble and adequate, a steamboat bridging the Atlantic between Old and New England, and arriving at its port with the punctuality of a planet, is a step of man in harmony with nature. The boat at St. Petersburg, which plies along the Lena by magnetism, needs little to make it sublime. When science is learned in love, and its power are wielded by love, They will appear the supplements and continuations of the material creation. End of essay. This audio presentation of Emerson's essay on art has been brought to you by audioenlightenment.com and has been recorded for the exclusive use of Audio Enlightenment members only. If you have received this audio from any website other than our own, please visit our website and let us know at your convenience.